So, yesterday we received some pretty unexpected news. Late last night, EA released a statement explaining that Battlefield Hardline's release date has now been pushed back into 2015. Now, of course, previously we didn't have any confirmed release date. We did know it was going to come out around October time from what we'd seen in the very early trailers, and of course it was to be expected to coincide with the release of the new Call of Duty title, Advanced Warfare. Now, of course, we always have seen the release of Battlefield games around November, October time, not only to compete with Call of Duty, but also in time for Christmas sales. So seeing this game pushed back into 2015 is definitely something we weren't expecting. Now, as well as the general statement released by EA, myself and a number of other YouTubers who actually travelled to San Francisco to help with development of the game actually received personal emails from Steve Papoutis, the general manager of Visceral Games, to thank us for our input and tell us a little bit more as to why the game has been delayed. And this can be broken down into three separate areas: multiplayer innovation, single player story depth, and game stability. Now, when we headed across to San Francisco to talk and help the developers with the game, something stood out that these guys really wanted to make this game the best it could possibly be. Not only was it the first time they'd ever invited YouTubers out there to help develop the game before it was even ready for any kind of alpha or beta, but they genuinely wanted our serious feedback, and since we gave them that feedback, we had seen a lot of those changes implemented into the closed beta, so they are taking our feedback very, very seriously. Now, of course, as we all know, the closed beta was pretty unexpected. We've never seen a Battlefield beta that early on in a game's life cycle. With Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, we saw the beta released maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the full release of the game. It was more of a demo than a beta, so seeing a beta very early on is only going to be a positive thing. It means the more feedback we give them, the more changes can be made and implemented before the game is released. So seeing the game now pushed back to 2015 can only be a good thing. Now, of course, there will be a lot of people out there who are upset the game isn't going to be released when they were expecting. I know a lot of people probably have made pre-orders of the game. They wanted to see it released in 2014 before Christmas time, but of course there are going to be a lot of people, myself included, who do see this as good news. If the game's being pushed back, it really means the developers want this game to be perfect before it's released. I think we all know far too well what happens when a game's released before it's complete, as we saw with Battlefield 4. So pushing a game back to make sure it's completely perfect, the best it can possibly be before released, is definitely the way to go in the future. So what are the changes that are being made? Well, to the multiplayer, arguably the most important part of the game, they're now seeing a lot of changes implemented since the beta at E3. Of course, that was only open to PC and PlayStation 4 users, but they now say they got a lot of feedback from those beta testers, and they want to implement a lot of these new features and changes that us, the community, have given them in feedback. So there must have been a lot of different things they wanted to implement into the game to push this title back by a fair few months. They also go on to say they don't believe yet this game is a true cops and robbers experience. They want to complete the fantasy of the cops and criminals game style. And the same is also being said for the single player. They've now said they want to improve the criminal revenge story experience. Now, I can tell you guys from when we were in San Francisco, when they first showed us a single player, we weren't very impressed. We did give them a lot of constructive feedback, criticism, a lot of critique to try and improve the single player because we just didn't think it had that much going for it. So seeing them go back and rewrite some of the single player and try and improve it is definitely a massive plus. Now, last but not least on the list is game stability, probably the most important change to be made to Battlefield Hardline. Of course, we all remember the massive stability problems we saw with Battlefield 4 when it was first released. Netcode issues, game crashing issues, battle log issues, and a lot of these problems still haunt the game today. So making Hardline as stable as possible is definitely the most important part of this process. I think the majority of this time will be taken up by incorporating all of the positive changes from Battlefield 4's CTE into Battlefield Hardline. There's no point in making all of these really great changes in BF4 and then just not incorporating them into a new Battlefield title. So I think we're going to see all of these new CTE changes that are proving to be very positive for BF4. They're all going to be tested out, and if they do work successfully, they probably will be brought across into Hardline for the game's initial release. So overall, I think it's pretty hard to argue that this isn't the step in the right direction. Of course, we all know in the last 12 months, EA and DICE have taken a lot of flack for the issues we saw with Battlefield 4. So seeing EA allow this title to be delayed to make it the best game as possible and not just be released to try and compete with Call of Duty and get those initial sales is definitely a step in the right direction. Of course, we are all a little bit disappointed we won't get to play the game as soon as we had expected, but I have said before I would have happily waited an extra few months to play Battlefield 4 if it had been perfect on release. So overall, I am pleased with this change. I think it is a step in the right direction for the future. Of course, we still do have an open beta for Hardline across all platforms to look forward to, and with having basically 2 betas, it means all of these changes can be a positive change for the title. Now finally, in other news, to confirm I was correct in my previous video, we've also now seen a delay to the Final Stand DLC. Now I'm assuming so far this delay has just been to cover a little bit of that gap between the release now of Battlefield Hardline. So unfortunately we are now seeing a step back for Final Stand, but we don't have a release date as of yet. So down in the comment section below, I want to hear from you. Do you think this delay is a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? And of course, if you did enjoy this video, a like is always appreciated and it massively helps me out. But in the meantime guys, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.